Hi, my name's Rachel McLeod, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and emotional wellness coach. And today I'm jumping on because I got a message in my inbox asking me to a specific question about grief, and so that's what I'm responding to. My little live situation hasn't told me what it is that I'm talking about because my title disappeared, but I'm going to pull it up because I want to do that word for word so that I can respond to her question as she gave it to me. Um, what we're talking about is how to heal from unresolved grief and how to get unstuck from that shutdown place, and how far do you need to go into the pain of it in order to really heal and feel alive again. And so that's really what this talk is going to be about. And so here we go. And when you jump on and you're hearing this, I want you to go ahead and ask me any questions. You can post those in the comment. I will weave them in because you're going to have questions that I want to make sure I answer. And there's some benefit to being on live that you get to ask the questions and get your answers heard. But that's also just going to help me pull out what you want to know and support you with that. So, when we're talking about grief, we're talking about loss of all kinds and any kinds. It can be a loss of a loved one. Um, it can be a loss of a job, a loss of our freedoms in some ways, a loss of our innocence as we knew it, like we just didn't know people could be so terrible. I'm speaking from words I've heard, right? Um, we can have a loss of a favorite item, right? And and these things can really have a big impact on us. There's different, like, um, they all sound like, okay, yeah, but we're talking about, like, there's some hierarchies of grief. And yes, I understand that I would say not necessarily hierarchies of grief, but intensity levels of grief, and how how you interact with grief, and how this grief interacts with your body, how grief interacts with your mind, and whether or not you can process it or not, whether it keeps circling around over and over and over again, and all of that. And I want to unpack that because I want to make this as broad to grief as possible. I've seen people terminated from a job after 25, 30 years go through a lot of depression because of the grief. And there's a lot coming through there. And I've also seen parents that have lost children or spouses, and really have grief that just doesn't go away. And not that grief should go away, right? We're going to dive into this because I'm going to tell you that statement right there can be very triggering to people, because when they hear about the grief going away, what they're hearing is their memories going away too. And I want to talk about that specifically because that is not the case. When we're talking about grief, grief is, and I want to tell you, this is not an emotion I have a lot of personal experience with at this point in my life. But I've had enough, and I've had enough recently, that I can say I have a lot of respect for this. This has given me a new insight into what my clients are going through, and I think that's important. And I think that what we know about grief is that it's an emotion just like any other emotion. So if you have any emotional issues, then you can absolutely relate to somebody with grief. But um, we don't need to relate, and everybody's is different, and so we can hold that space for each other. Okay, I need to start with the brain stuff because I'm feeling like I've said a lot of triggering stuff. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit. All of our emotions are part of our navigation system, every single one of them, whether they're good or whether they're bad. If you are human, you've experienced all the emotions, and hopefully you can experience all the emotions. And that the goal is not that any of these go away, but that we can have a good relationship with them. That they're not, like, we don't want a relationship with anything or anyone that's just right in our face like this. Whether it's anxiety or grief or depression or overwhelm or our inner critic. Like, that's not a very functional relationship, and we need to create that everywhere. Um, and with grief, though, I really feel like I experience this as just taking, like, whatever you're standing on, just dropping that out from under you, being hit in the lungs, losing your breath, um, whirling, feeling like you can't stand up. Every time you stand up, there's another wave that crashes down on top of you, and um, that is a very, very disorienting feeling. And so So let's talk about this. Okay, so our brains are perfectly designed to work through any and every emotion that comes up with us, that comes up in within us, and that we're confronted with outside of ourselves, right? Because we're dealing with a world of people that are experiencing grief right now, and it can really make it hard to navigate because what's going on and all that stuff. But what we know is that grief is over here; it's in the emotion center, and what happens is grief can really be a big emotion. Being lost or losing someone is very disorienting because sometimes our grounding is in them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it can really feel like your world as you know it is just gone, right? And that what happens there is there's lots of survival stuff happening. How will we be safe? What will happen now? Will this happen again? Right? And this is it's trying to cope with what the heck just happened. And that's a lot to process through. Let's just say your processor is this big. The goal with grief is to get all of that into your processor, and so that your brain can heal and can really move that through the healing pathways. Because that's where the magic comes. All emotion is food for the soul, and so whether it's grief or whether it's panic or whether it's terror or whether it's hurt, it's all food for the soul. Our brain is like, it doesn't, it's like, oh, this is grief. Oh, I mean, it doesn't care. I mean, we care because some of these emotions are empowering and some of them make us want to withdraw, but really, we can really work with the brain in the same way in each case. Okay. So, all of us experience grief. All of us have to work with this emotion, and life is set up in such a way that everybody gets the opportunity to do this work. So if you feel like you have unresolved grief and it keeps coming around and around and around, this is a sign that your system is having a hard time getting it through the healing pathways. It's getting it through your brain, and there's lots of things that will stop that and block that. Okay, and so I want to talk about what stops our brains from healing, and I want to then I'm going to talk about how far do we need to go in. Okay, because I think that that will be the best help here. So um, let's see. So what when we're talking about grief, the things that hold us into grief patterns is one, the emotion is too intense. This will our survival system turns on, our defense strategies turn on, and we have lots of ways to avoid and to not get into the grief because our system has decided that it will destroy us, we will die, all like the dramatic things that our brain thinks. Like we just learned, don't touch that, right? And so, and that's a strategy, but a lot of this has to do with your beliefs about this grief. Some of us run from grief because we believe it's going to destroy us. Others of us run from grief because I've worked with lots of people that have lost loved ones, and they really are their brain has associated grief, healing the grief from losing connection with the loved one, losing memories, losing that feeling of connection. And sometimes we have a belief that we need to suffer to make things right. And so if those beliefs are there, your grief is not going anywhere. You're actually using your grief to fulfill whatever contract you have or to hold on to the person or the animal or the job or anything. And so, but the truth of the matter is that in working with people, what I found is that if they can, and they can, if we can set up for their brain how they like it, a way for them to hold the memories without being tortured every day by waves and waves of grief, that will get them moving. And then the brain will just all of a sudden start reorganizing. What we're working on there, or we're working on this at the belief level. And so because your belief level is your subconscious programming. It's like how your computer runs. It's the program that your computer runs on, and the better your program runs on, the more smooth it is and the more you can do, right? But if your computer program has I'd like to let go of the grief, but we need to hold on to the memory and this is how we do it, then it's not going anywhere. You won't go onto the grief. You won't let the grief emotion go, and that's what we want to move. Grief is supposed to come here, tell you things, and you'll hear what it's trying to tell you, and you'll pick up that message. When you pay attention to it, then it will be able to move. Okay. That's what we really want. That's we want to move this emotion through the healing pathways, because that's where the healing takes place, and that's where you can really start to feel alive again, because your brain has to go through so many um, reorganizations to get back to that alive state. But I want to back up a little bit before we go into that. um, Avoidance, if you're avoiding grief, this means that it's too big for you to handle. It's too big for you to approach in that way. There are so many more strategies to come at it, from the back door, from the side door, from underneath, from above. That's some of the stuff that you will get from a professional, some options there. Or perhaps as you just look for them, you'll start to notice there's ways I could deal with this that is not so painful, because we do want to avoid pain, because that's what will interrupt the healing process, you know? And so, but this can and should be broken down in such a way that you can tolerate it, because this is what we need to do. We need to get it through the healing pathways without your survival center saying, stop, no further, go back. And that's what happens, is that the grief comes up to be processed, and your survival center says, no, up, no. And this happens in your dreams, it happens in your nightmares, it happens in your daytimes, it happens constantly. And then you have to find different ways to cope, because this one emotion cannot get through, this one situation can't get through. Okay. Also, the we do this with denial. Will Denial can really block ourselves from healing from grief, because we're just not going to acknowledge it. But let me tell you that denial is a really healthy part of the grief process. And if you can get this denial emotion through your healing pathways, you're good. And that's really what we're supposed to be helping ourselves with. We're supposed to be helping ourselves with whatever we need, with all of our defenses, right? We got to get our defenses through the healing pathways so that you can get some flexibility with how you're defending yourself. And if you really do need to defend yourself in this way, do you really need to defend yourself from grief in this way? Well, I don't know. Let's get it through the healing pathways and see what your brain says. If it's stuck over here, the defenses, your defense strategies, if they're stuck over here, we can't look at them. We can't upgrade them. We can't resolve them. If we can get those through, all of a sudden your brain is like, oh, I think we should make a little bit of adjustment over here, or, that one over there, we don't really need that. And all of a sudden you start to open up, and you can start facing things in ways that you wouldn't have before, because your survival system is going to allow for that now. So if you're avoiding or denying, that's just your system is having a hard time. And those are your strategies to keep yourself alive, because grief really can make you feel like you're going to go under and you're not going to come back up. And it's such a powerful emotion that if you carry it for years and years and years, you can really become afraid of it, and you can really have a traumatic relationship with your grief, right? And um, and so let me talk a little bit more. So also, if you have stuff you're grieving about, a lot of times, right, there are stages of grief. There's studies out there about this. These are the stages we go through, and when we have a grief, and sometimes we can go around and around, and that's okay. You're moving. Sometimes we can get stuck in a couple, and that's a sign we're not moving. And we want to get that moving. One of the stages of grief is just anger. You're just angry. And maybe that looks like rage. Maybe that looks like you're livid. Maybe that looks like you're frozen and frustrated and you want to scream every day. That is, that's the stuff that we have to get through the healing pathways. And it's okay. It's okay to be angry. It's great to be angry. I think that when I see people angry, I think, okay, good. All right. Because anger lets you know there's something in here that you care about, and you care enough about yourself to know that you didn't like this, and you get to be angry if you lost a loved one. You get to be, let me tell you what, you get to fill the earth with it, like the energy. If you want to throw your head back and scream to the highest stratosphere, you get to do that, because it's your emotion, and you get to move that, and you have to figure out how to move that. And we want to do it without hurting anybody else, right? And there's so many powerful ways you can get your body to heal this, and it does need to be a mind body intervention. There's lots of great interventions out there. I have the ones I like the most, and you can find the ones that you like the most, right? If you're like, hey, anyway, but take me to your leader and show me the ones that you like. That's something we can talk about. Um, but really, I want you to understand that your grief isn't meant to sit and beat you with a stick for the rest of your life. That's not it. And you know that. So, but yes, but if grief is coming up, that's the emotion along. I mean, if anger is coming up, that's the emotion along the path to your healing. And so you've got to be able to move your anger through your healing pathways. And things that stop us from healing anger and work and moving angry emotion is if we've seen other people become angry and they harm somebody else, or they used it to self-destruct, or they used it in a destructive way, then we'll learn like anger is not okay, and that will block us from being able to move the grief energy, because some of grief is anger, right? So if you have rules and our subconscious programming that block out, or block shut down your ability to process anger, grief is going to be a tough one for you to move, because it's all of it. It's all of it. Regret is, a lot of times people are regretting things, and it's like flashbacks circling. And anytime it comes up, it comes again. That circling feeling is a sign that your brain is not being able to heal something it's trying to heal. It wants to go to whatever the regret is, and it wants to grab that through the healing pathways, and it's trying, but it's interacting with the survival center, is it's pulling things, and the survival center is saying no, and it's pulling it, and it's trying to say no, and it's not getting it done, it's not getting it through the healing pathways, and so your brain isn't able to create any change or any healing with it. And then one of the other things is acceptance. This is another part of grief, and this is something that people feel really blocked with, because their belief system doesn't match, it doesn't line up for acceptance. um, so, because like, sometimes people believe that if they accept something, that means they like it. Well, no, that's not what acceptance is at all. You can absolutely hate things and accept them for what they are. And that's a tricky one to understand. Brains do this acceptance piece naturally. So I really like to walk people through that. And when it comes up out of their brain, I'm like, there, that's what we're looking for. Let's create that more. And they're like, oh, okay. And you don't just create acceptance. You don't say, okay, I'm just going to accept it. No, your body has to start creating it and generating it. And that means that the beliefs are coming into alignment, that you find a way to make it through, right? You find a way that all this stuff makes sense. That's what your brain is trying to do. It's trying to, like, how do we live in a world where this can happen? And it doesn't know. And so it's got all these beliefs, like, I used to do this, but now it's different. And just it can't make the connection to line up the neural pathways to the right thing for you. And it won't until the emotions move through, because the emotions is part of the power that your brain uses to create. And so you've got your other power center up in here. This is your creative center, your thinking, right? But it doesn't have any juice without the emotion. And if the emotion can't get through, then you're only thinking with thoughts. You're not thinking with emotion and thoughts. And we don't really talk about that, or we don't really talk like this in our culture. So and I don't know if you've seen this, but this is where we get our greatest performances. Your greatest piano players, your greatest singers, they've done enough work to move the emotion and the thinking into their thinking centers, and they're able to create a masterpiece that we can all watch. And we're all creating masterpieces like this out of our life, but we need the emotion into the thinking center. And that's when we start finding new ways to live, new ways to cope, new ways to thrive, new ways to be vibrant, new ways. Is it even okay to be thriving and vibrant if you lost somebody? Or is it okay to be happy when the world is a mess? Is it like, right? These are questions your subconscious mind is running around trying to figure out. And it needs to. That's its job, is to do that for you. But it needs the emotion. And so your job in this work is to move the emotion. Okay. And so now let's talk about how far into the pain do you need to go. If you activate too much pain, the whole process shuts down. So I would say this is not about, well, so I would say that there's lots of ways to heal this issue without activating lots of pain. And that's going to be based on what you can tolerate. Some people just will go, like, I think about grief as a big lake of pain, right? And some people can really run into this lake of pain, dive into the center, roll around, and just cry and be there. And we can be using interventions while they're there. They're good with that. They like it. I don't understand them. I'm just helping them with their brain. Most people can do a little bit of work at a time. They can, like, if you think about this lake, they can go in there with a little spoon and come out, and we can work through that. And a little spoon, and we can come out. And what happens is that people pretty soon they're like, okay, that's okay. Okay, I could do this. I could do this. And pretty soon they'll get more courageous. Like, well, what if I took a big spoon to this? And they'll try, and then they'll like, okay, we did that. We're moving a little bit of grief, right? We're dosing it. We're not just running in there. We're dosing, and all of a sudden people get a little bit more courageous. And then they're like, well, what if I hook up a pipe in there and we start sucking that stuff out through the pathways like that? And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And next thing you know, they can process like that, right? And so there's those are really great abstract ways to do this work. You can do this work looking directly at it, or you can do this work looking at it. I'm looking the wrong way. Looking at it from the side. Looking at it from the side is less scary, and it kind of tricks the brain to not really look at it, not really see it, but you can see it. You know it's there, but it's not really there. And you can absolutely create tons of change just like that. And there's so many tricks you can use beyond that. And I'm not talking just about looking at it sideways. I'm talking about metaphorically looking at it sideways. But hey, I mean, I'm not open to like when looking at it out the side of your head. Absolutely, out the side of your eye. Um, and some people cannot really go in there for a really really long time, and they can walk around the edges. The thing with grief, and that's good too, because like just even it's kind of like the wall of Jericho kind of idea. It just came to me right now. And you keep walking around, and you know what you're walking around, and that's enough awareness to start to meet the minimum requirements for healing. Because in my book, you need attention and intervention. So if you're walking around the outside and you're using an intervention, and you keep walking around the outside, you're having effect in the lake. And probably what happens is that effect is enough for you to be able to, okay, now what am I going to do with the lake of the grief lake? And now you can look at it again, and you can, maybe you have to be far at a distance. You say, okay, it's still really big. Let's try this. I've had people do magic, like they're not really doing magic, they're doing mental magic, and create some, I love doing this, create a potion, right? But it's in like this one made a grief healing, um, like a Tide Pod. And so that's what her thing is. And she just would launch it into the pool and just watch it do the healing work from back, right? And so we'd use an intervention and see what the healing work would do. And so it was a trick to be able to pull her out of it, but to still pay attention and get the healing work done. And the brain loves that stuff. It eats it up. And so you can really go into pretty big traumas. You can absolutely go into really big traumas like grief and get a lot of healing work without getting the pain on you. And a lot of times when people are doing massive grief work, they need the pain really, really minimized. And so when you're working with somebody, I would say work with somebody who's going to desensitize, who's going to help you get this down and desensitize it so you can get it. I just used a big word. Desensitization is the act of what we therapists call taking the emotional pain out of it. And that's the end process of getting it through the healing pathways, is that at the end it's desensitized. And so at the end of this, you have a package of experience that doesn't have the same pain in it, but it has all the knowledge. And from there, your brain makes wisdom, it makes power, it makes reorganization, it makes upgrades to your system that really help you to thrive for the next phases of your life. And that's with all emotion. That's with anxiety. That's with depression. That's with sadness. That's with anger. Um, that's what your brain does. It takes it and it digests it out. And some of what's eliminated in the emotional digestive process is pain, because pain's not really serving us, and it doesn't need the pain in order to do what's valuable and important to us, like hold on to memories of our loved ones, right? We don't need the pain to do that. As a matter of fact, the pain can really stop us from connecting with and grabbing all of the beauty that we got to experience. Um, this reminds me of a time I was working at the hospital, and I was using emotional freedom techniques. They fired me for that, just so you know, even though I had permission. But just it was awesome. And if you, yeah, don't be trying to do EFT without their explicit permission. Um, but it was wonderful. I was in there, and this was my favorite part of my job. So when they fired me for that, I was like, I gotta go, and I gotta go do something where I can do this because this is my jam. And here I am. So they did me a huge favor, because I am not a hospital social worker. So I digress. Let's come back. So I was working with this woman. I entered into the room and she was just sobbing uncontrollably. And she was there for something I don't recall. I was there for the emotional stuff, mental stuff. So she was sobbing uncontrollably, and that's why I was called because they were like, this woman's just crying, crying, crying. So I go in there, and she doesn't stop crying. But I ask her, what's going on, and she just talked, my grandpa, and she wanted her grandpa. I was like, well, that's reasonable. I feel you. And then it turns out that he had passed several years ago, and she was just beside herself. So I engaged her in emotional freedom techniques, that I thought I had permission to be engaging her with. And and we just did one round, and all of a sudden she just starts laughing. And I was like, okay, this is strange, but I'm here. I'm here for you. What are we doing now? So I just sat and held space for her silently as she's going through this process. She's laughing now, and she just all of a sudden she was like, if he was here, this is what he'd be saying. He'd be saying, girl, get it together. And she just laughed and laughed. And she was watching different memories come up because of her pain, she could only go back to the pain of it, one small piece of the issue, because the grief, because that's what brains do. Where there's pain, it becomes attracted to just that. It doesn't care about all the good things. It doesn't care about all that stuff. It's like, this is what's causing me pain. This is a problem. We don't know what happened here. Why is this here? What are we doing? And it wants to heal that. And so you can feel like a negative person about this because your brain keeps going to the negative aspect. And you're like, I, I have all these good memories. Why am I keep going here? This is how brains work. Your inner healer is obsessed with healing for you. And so if there's something that it wants to heal, that's all it will focus on. But when you work with your inner healer and you let it do this work, and so you let it go into this little piece it's not little, this is pain. This is a lot of pain. But if you can resolve this pain for it and help it with it, you're not going to resolve it for it, but you're going to help it resolve the pain. All of a sudden, that's gone, and it starts opening up because it's looking for more pain. That's its job. But it all starts opening up, and what you get out of that is you get all of the good too, and your brain doesn't keep going back to that one spot. It starts wandering around because now you have access to it now. And before, how brains function is it was only going to the one. And now you get more of your loved one, and you get to come into more of that. And so there's so many benefits from moving emotion, but this isn't easy. This is one where and let me tell you that at the bottom of some people's anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress is grief. I had this one kid that I was working with, and he was severely depressed, and we had to help him with grief. And once he got the grief through, then his depressive symptoms started lifting, and it was quick. And it did not take a long time. We must have spent like 2 sessions on the grief, this one specific grief, and all of a sudden things just started moving. It was awesome. And that's the thing, is that grief can really jam your whole pipes, the whole healing pathways. It can really jam them so you can't get anything else through. And some of that's because your inner healer is so so obsessed with healing this one thing, it won't let anything else through. It's like, no, I can't talk to you right now, I'm busy. But it can't do the work, and it can stay stuck like that for decades. And that's why doing grief work is really, really important, because sometimes it is the foundation of people's anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress. Really. And so, how far do you need to go in to heal? Not that far. Not far at all. And matter of fact, you can, as a matter of fact, not go in, but back up away from it to get the healing. And so, whatever you need, your brain can do it. You just need the right strategies and the right solutions and the right interventions, really, because it is a really huge opportunity for healing, a really huge opportunity for just elevation. You know, you see some people that have done this grief process, and you're just amazed by them, because they're just like, wow, how do you come through that and be thriving? That's what I think. Um, and it's because the brain does that. That's what the brain does. And I think about this from people that have lost family members who are still alive, right? They've lost their family members to their family being jerks and defensive and rejecting, right? And then to watch them go through that and take that stuff through the healing pathways and all of a sudden be able to create beauty with. This is the power of the brain. And this is the power of the emotions. And if we can stop being so afraid of them, which we will, we can start learning about them. We can start rebuilding our relationship with these emotions and really create a lot of transformation. So, um, that's the information I have written down. I think that's what I wanted to share off the top of my head. If there are any questions, um, comments, conclusions, you can go ahead and post them now. I'll check those out. The other thing I would say is that if being able to move this emotion is something that's really important to you and you want to see how I can help you with that, go ahead and grab a spot on my calendar and we'll take a look. If this is something I can help you with, I will absolutely show you how. And if not, I will help you I'll point you in the direction of something that will work better. And this opportunity is for people that are really in I do not want to live one more day being crushed by guilt, by grief, by regret. I want to take my life back. I want to step into that vibrant place. And guess what? We're not all right there, right? There's sometimes where we're like, and no judgment. Sometimes we're just thinking about it. Sometimes we're like, no, I need to sit here just a little bit longer and feel this pain. I have no judgment on how your process is whatsoever. I know I'm highly motivated to get out of pain ASAP. I like that. And so really, if that's you, if you're like, I want out of this now, go ahead and grab that spot on my calendar. And let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay, good. All right, Melissa. I was concerned there because I was, if that made sense, because it's really hard when we talk about grief as a whole, because it's a grief emotion, it's grief energy, and obviously, if we have different things that happen for us, um, if we have different things that happen to us, we can have more intense grief or less intense grief. But the brain is so wild that it can really, you know. Okay, I'm going to answer this question. Can you start us off with a simple strategy? Um, I would start you off with a simple intervention, which is emotional freedom techniques. It's the simplest you can use. It's easy. It's free. You can actually go to my website and there's a handout on there. I just did that, so I haven't been hiding it. I just made it available, and it's at rachelmcleod.com. If you look at the top, there's a handout little spot, or you can rachelmcleod.com/handout. You can go right there, and that will teach you. That has like a little cheat sheet for emotional freedom techniques. It's really simple to use. Really can't get that wrong, and it's really helpful for the survival center. So you can try that. Get started with that, and really, I cannot give you a simple strategy because I don't know which one would work for you, and I don't want to run you into pain um, that you don't have support enough to manage or handle. And so that's important to me. But what I will say is that follow your intuition. If you know where some stuff is that you'd like to work on, that's a good place to start, because if you'd like to do that, that means you're already being pulled into it. Follow that. You know, um, yeah. And so if you're feeling repelled by it, don't go in there. That is your body saying that is not going to be good. Don't do it. Don't go there. Don't. Maybe it'll come back in a week from now. Maybe depending on what you're doing, that'll be something that you do feel pulled into soon. And so, but definitely hear the push and the pull. If you feel repelled by something, that's not the right strategy. If you're like, I want to get in there, but not like that, then that's not for you. Then it's like, okay, well, how could I get in there? Let's try this. Okay, that's a little bit better, but and then you can figure out how your brain really will help you resolve that. And every time you get you're getting so much information about yourself. And so gather all that up, because then you really find the ingredients to how you can heal. So does that help you? Okay. All right. I think that might be all. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds. Let me see if there's anything else I can consider here. Okay, Jennifer says yes. Good. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we'll check that out and yeah, take that advice. Absolutely. And this is you get when you get through these things, you get so much freedom back that it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Whatever you got to do to get this stuff moved through, and really that's honoring it, honoring this grief, honoring the emotions, honoring the anger, and then moving it. Because honoring it is just a different way to pay attention, right? And that's the minimum requirement is to pay attention. And so honoring it's just a different strategy for that. But once you get it through, you get to see so much. I mean, all the things like the things that you're afraid of, gone. It's like it's like you have a grief and every all the fears that come from there and that state and your that pop out every time this grief is activated, gone. Nightmares, gone. And then you just left and you can get this place and you can explore it and just it's and you don't even have to explore it consciously. Your brain gets to do that subconsciously, unconsciously. That's what it does. That's what it likes to do. So, all right. Wonderful chatting with everyone and or with you, Melissa. And I feel like I'm chatting with everyone here. And absolutely, Jennifer, thanks for participating as well. I will jump off. Thank you for your question, Melissa. And I hope that helps keep me informed. I love celebrating these things with you. Like when people have celebrations, I love them. I want to hear about what's happening in your inner world and how you weren't able to do this, but now you are, and different communications you've been able to have. And so I love that stuff, and I'd love to celebrate those with you. Okay, take care.